Well, welcome back to Mr. Obsolete's Vintage Homesteading. Today we're going to start out with axes. This will be Vintage Axe Review number 6. And what we have is a Evansville single bit axe. And they were made from the 1890s until 1936 when they went bankrupt. And some sources say the company was bought out, others say that was the end of them, so I don't know for sure. But one thing I do know for sure is they're one of the best axes ever made. The steel in them is superb. This one weighs 6 pounds. And it's 7 3/4 long, 4 3/4 across the face. The pole is 1.5 inches. Like I say, at 6 pounds, a pretty hefty axe. And the steel in these, like I say, is really good stuff. A regular file will hardly touch them to sharpen them. You have to have a really exceptionally good quality file, or use a nice sandstone grinder like I have. But it's a fairly thin profile through here and then wider here, so it basically was going to be used for splitting wood. And I get this really crummy handle. It's the only one I could find at the time to put on it. This big fat clubby horrible thing. I'll probably rehandle it when I can find a higher quality handle, but I'm going to thin it down and stuff. And the thing that's weird about this wood, it's supposed to be hickory, but I treated it months ago with boiled linseed oil and it's sort of soaked in, but it's still slick, which I'm going to have to take some sandpaper and rough it up to make it so I can get a better grip on it. But the reason that I wanted to find one of these, I didn't have one for a long time, is I found this little Evansville long time ago, and this is my single most used axe. I use it for branching and brushing, and I mean, it's just superb. It really holds an edge, and only weighs 1 1/4 pounds ready to go, but boy, that's a real super slicer. It's got a real nice handle on it. I like the way the grip is, nice and thin. Just an excellent axe. And so I wanted to find a bigger one to see how it performed. Like I say, the profile on the design is basically, to me, it looks like for splitting firewood. But we're going to take it out and chop down a little tree today that's distressed, and we need to clean out the area. And in the second half of the video, we're going to go back to what we talked about in our last video about vintage two-stroke oils. We'll do some better pictures of them and do a little more talking about them and stuff. And so anyway, let's go out and get chopping. Okay, well, we got this poor little tree here that needs to come out. The thing is that there's a bunch of trees in this area. They're all grown together and more than half dead, very little foliage. All the foliage on this side only, nothing on this side because there's no sun coming through, and all the branches on the tree over here are completely dead too. But anyway, the thing that'll be interesting on this is that the cutting edge, the bevel on it, is pretty blunt. Like I say, it's more for splitting than chopping down a tree. So anyway, we'll see how well it cuts on this, and then we'll do a few chops for a little one just to see the difference on them. So anyway, I'll get my gloves on here and we'll take the chops and see how it goes. You see, I'm using a rubberized glove. That way I can get a decent grip on that slick handle. Like I say, I think I'll try fixing it first. If it doesn't work, then I'll just go ahead and get rid of it. But yeah, it cuts good. All the needles are falling down on me, dead needles. Anyway, let's give it a couple more chops here. Thing is, with a big heavy axe like this, you don't really need to put a lot of energy in it. If you do, it just makes you get tired. Yeah, I'll try the other little axe here to see, just as a comparison. Okay, 1 1/4 pounds. can see it does a really good job for a little bitty axe. Well, we'll put a few more cuts on this side, and we'll come around on the other side. Well, about a third of the way through. We'll be back on the other side. Yeah, it's coming along. Well, we'll be back when we're ready to drop it. Well, let's try splitting this. You can see there's a great big knot right here. This wood is super dense and really hard to split, so that's where this extra... Well, we're getting ready to cut this in half. The camera fizzed out on us, so we're back, so I actually split it. But this wood, just this little piece like this, weighs 12 pounds. This stuff is really, really dense. I don't know what kind of wood it is, but it's really nasty stuff. But I'll show you some of the grain structure here. You can see it's not real straight. It weaves back and forth, and over here where there was a knot down here. But it's really hard to split because the axe has to have a super sharp edge. I just have a medium sharp edge on that. I didn't spend a lot of time on it, but because I want to reprofile it. It's got kind of a blunt edge on it, and you can see when it's cutting a tree, it's not the most efficient cutter for dropping trees. But anyway, here's just a little piece of this stuff here. It takes a lot of effort to pull that off. It's really stringy and tough. Of course, I had that big knot right there too. There you can see the grain structure again. Wanders back and forth, and little knots in it. And the strands are really big, and it's part of the reason they're really tough. Anyway, we got another piece here. We'll try splitting that. Got a few small knots in it, so we'll put those towards the back there. There's a small crack right in the front here too, so try and get that right here. Well, let's give it a whack and see what happens here. Well, that cut through it good because there's no big knots like that other piece. But anyway, once I get this tuned in and sharpened really nice, get the handle thinned down and stuff, it's going to be an excellent, superb axe, just like the little one I have. Okay, well, we're going to come back and talk more about two-stroke oils. Well, we're going to talk again about two-cycle oils. I'm going to start with the McCullough oil. Early years it was mostly mineral oil with a lot of additives, and over time it became partial synthetic. So this would be an early one, where it's mostly mineral oil. And this would be like a 20-to-1 mixture. And later on it went 32-to-1, which I don't have one of those. And then you went to the 40-to-1 mix, and there again, partial synthetic to make them last, because if you had a McCullough and you used other brands of oil, you better run them at 20-to-1 because the oils weren't as good, and so the saw would suffer from it. The next evolution in that would be this. Would be pretty late product line here. There again, partial synthetic. And this was probably made just a little bit before this one because it's still in a can. And there again, 40:1 2-cycle oil it says on it, lubricant. And this one's kind of a neat one. Shows a little mini Mac on there, and it's 40:1. It's got some really nice graphics. And the other thing too is that they had chain and bar oil that you could buy, and this is fairly early because it's a metal can. Later they use a plastic can like that. So anyway, we'll be coming back and just take a picture of each one up close here so you can see them better. Prior to World War II, there was no such thing as specialized 2-cycle oil. It wasn't until after the war when all the pent-up demand for things that they couldn't get during the war, like outboard motors and chainsaws starting to take off in sales, and lawn mowers and everything else, and two-cycle engines were inexpensive and cheap to build. Briggs and Stratton, or a cast iron Clinton, in the early years was fairly expensive to make. Just a little cheap 2-stroke engine could be made probably for about a third of the cost, but the oils were not really up to the job at the time, so they started development. And during World War II they spent a lot of time on oils trying to make stuff to last longer and more durable. So anyway, like in the early years, like the Bardol here, it says outboard motor oil, and down below it says chainsaws and other things too, lawnmowers. That was mostly mineral oil with a few additives in it. And most of the time the early oils like this were actually 40-weight oil because the clearances in the early motors and stuff were substantial enough where they needed that thick oil film in there to lubricate them properly. Same thing here. It says outboard motor oil on the back. It says you can use it in everything else. It's just amazing, all the companies that started making this stuff. Like this is AC Delco. So General Motors is actually trying to sell outboard motor oil, and you can see it says as A30 right there. But there was a lot of private companies like this Blue Bay, and it's 40 weight. It's really thick, heavy stuff. But anyway, the development of the oils improved pretty rapidly. And by the 60s and stuff, there was some fairly good oils. Of course, the McCullough was one of the leaders of the premium oils. And Castrol was another one. This is interesting how I got these. I used to work for a dealership years ago, and they bought another dealership who'd been a Castrol dealer, and they tasked me with getting rid of all the inventory they had. So I sold off all the oils and stuff, but there was a bunch of cases of this. Nobody wanted them, so I bought them all. Been using them for years. Getting fairly low, but This is a neat bottle. It's plastic, but it shows all the neat stuff. And it's got a Vespa scooter, a Scorpion snowmobile, a moped, the old two-stroke Saab car, two-stroke lawnmower, and an outboard motor, two-cycle outboard on there. Graphics are really neat. That's why I collect them. And something just interesting on the Remington chainsaw oil. Like I say, the manufacturers were working to improve the oils dramatically. And this says on it 30 weight motor oil. That's why they always ran it 16:1. They didn't go to the thin mixes because they weren't using the really top-notch oil with a lot of additives in it, just regular mineral oil. So anyway, talk about the last few of them here. This is Lawn Boy two-cycle oil for the Lawn Boy lawnmowers. There's an early can here. Here's a later can, and the thing that's interesting on this, it says ashless oil. And a lot of oils like the Still and Husky oils today have a lot of ash in them, and it's bad stuff, just like carbon. It can destroy your saw, so you have to run them wide open all the time for them to run clean. But since this Lawn Boy was part of the Outboard Marine Corporation, Johnson Evernude Outboards, the Lawn Boy lawnmowers and stuff, the oil they used was Bardol VBA, and that's what was in these cans too. And if you use these exclusively in the lawnmower, rarely ever did you have a carbon problem or anything else. And a lot of the lawn boys that I've fixed and worked on over the years, because cheap people were using cheap oil, ended up getting scored cylinder bore because they never cleaned the carbon. But using this stuff was almost never a problem. So there again, using the really good stuff made a difference. And one of the last ones, again, they started making it specialized, like, okay, well, like I say, they started making specialized oils, and the Bardol VBA, which I use, is right on motorcycle oil. And I've used it in everything. It's a two-stroke for years and years, and never had an engine failure on anything, plus no carbon either. But one of the tricks with this type of oil was that if it's good enough for a racing motorcycle, it's sure going to work in your chainsaw and everything else, which it did in the outboard motors. But as the snowmobiles became a big deal later on too. In 1960 there was only about 4 manufacturers, and by 1970 there was over 212. But they had special requirements, and so they made specific oils like this one strictly for snowmobiles, so it'll stay in suspension in cold weather and running at the cold temperatures that they did. So anyway, there's just kind of a little evolution of two-stroke oils, where they came from and evolved, and how a huge number of companies got in making this stuff, and a lot of them were not very good, and of course it disappeared over time. And like today, we just have a fairly limited amount, but not near as many as there used to be. But anyway, our last video too, that we were talking about a link and stuff that didn't show up, and I want to talk about the oils for modern saws, but I'm not going to go into it today, so we'll just put a link to their videos. And Hot Saws 101 did a test of a lot of oils about 5 years ago, and the oils haven't changed since then, so his information is perfect. But he talks about the burning point, how much ash, carbon, everything about lubricity. He really knows his stuff. He's a professional logger, builds custom chainsaws for people and stuff, and I would recommend watching that if you have modern saws. I'm not qualified because I don't own any modern saws anymore. So we'll see you on the next video.